Hey, I think I need to preface this by saying I'm not a right winger. I'm not even registered to vote. I am not the greatest Trump supporter you've ever met. I'm heavily critical of Trump. I don't really see him as, my Lord and fucking Savior, Kirito or some shit, bro. If I had to pick a title for myself, I would call myself a moderate or maybe an independent or maybe a libertarian, but never actually right wing. I'm gonna just keep it a buck with you. I hate partisanship, period. I feel as though being able to work with both sides is what is needed right now to be able to further the nation. And I kind of pride myself on not really watching mainstream media. I know it's not really something that you should be like, woohoo, I'm like the fucking greatest ever. I don't fucking watch CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. But I think it's important to like let this be known. I don't like watching those types of mainstream media. You'd much more find me watching people like Tim Pool on YouTube. I'd consider myself a casual observer and an onlooker. And this is just my documentation of what I've seen going on recently. Feel free to dispute me in the comments. Go ahead. I actually welcome it. But do not hate or spite me just because I have a different viewpoint from you. It's counter progressive. It doesn't really help anyone. And you would just be proving my point right.
Then please forgive me. Allow me to demonstrate the skill of Shaolin, the special technique of shadow boxing.
My main concern with the far left is that there is unchecked violence that they bring in the name of social justice and political correctness, how they silence dissent by calling it hate speech, and how Orwellian their actions are. Everything about the far left as of right now reminds me of 1984 and Animal Farm. And we all know how well those books ended. Everything about the far left has the marks of these books. Hate speech is a thing now. And if I had to equate it to anything, I'd probably equate it to thought crime in 1984, where you could get cancelled or even worse, your private information will be doxxed just because you thought differently from people. We're now keeping a list of those who dissent from us, thanks to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
This is what organizing looks like.
That's right.
This is what building power looks like. This is what changing the country looks like. I'm proud to be a bartender. Ain't nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with working retail, folding clothes for other people to buy. There is nothing wrong with preparing the food that your neighbors will eat.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
People are demanding retribution if you voted against their candidate. If it sounds reasonable to you that you should keep a list of people who dissent from you, you should know people like Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini kept lists of people who dissented from them. They silenced people who thought differently from them, and they used fear and intimidation tactics. Tell me what the difference is from Hitler Youths storming classes, dragging out lecturers because they were preaching a different doctrine from the Nazi party, with Jordan Peterson being mobbed by students simply by uttering the phrase that he doesn't want his government to mandate that he speaks a certain way.
Point is, well, okay, so now a person is compelled under Canadian law to use the pronoun of another individual's choice on pain of law. And I thought, well, no, that's not acceptable. It's one thing to put limits on what a person can't say, like say with hate speech laws, which I also don't agree with, by the way, but that's a different argument. I think it's a narrower argument. But to compel me to use a certain content when I'm formulating my thoughts or my actions under threat of legislative action, I thought, no, what's happened there is the government has introduced compelled speech legislation into the private sphere. It's never happened in the history of English common law. And so I said, there's no way I'm abiding by that. I don't care what your damn rationale is. We're compassionate. It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're playing this radical collectivist left-wing game. You're trying to gain linguistic supremacy in the area of public discourse. You're doing that using compassion as a guise, and you're pulling the wool over people's eyes. And you're not going to do it with me.
Peterson is the one fighting fascism here. He's not the aggressor in this situation, and yet he's painted as a radical right-winger who's oppressing his transgendered students by not using their preferred pronouns. All Peterson said was that he does not want his government forcing him into speaking in a certain way. One of the tools of fascism and communism is the government being able to control what you say out loud.
The first big problem is timing the language to scientific advance. Yes. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. You won't have seen the dictionary, 10th edition yet, Smith? It's that thick. The 11th edition will be that thick.
Well, the revolution will be complete when the language is perfect.
The secret is to move from translation to direct thought to automatic response. No need for self-discipline. Language coming from here, not from here.
Not PC to make laws forcing me to speak and act in a certain way. That's just taking my rights away. That's just authoritarianism, and that's how fascists are made. And that's one of the main reasons I found it so hard to sympathize with the left. I enjoy not needing to have my government look over my shoulder, ensuring that I speak a certain way. I should not be punished for what I say as long as I'm not making a direct call to violence.
Social justice, 1, 2, 3. I wanna be PC. It's just the way to be for me and you. Your hateful slurs are through.
I call woo-woo on you.
We'll fight until you're PC black and blue. We are language police, fighting bigotry. Hurtful words can suck our turds, cause it's PC for me.
And you.
Yeah!
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, PC, bro.
Again, I do not have a problem with using someone's preferred pronouns. If you tell someone to use a certain set of pronouns that you'd like and they agree with it, then there should be no problem with that. My only problem is with having a government be the one to step in and command me under a certain set of laws to do as they say. That's a very slippery slope. It sets a precedent that the government can interfere with people's free speech, and that's a very slippery slope because they can use that rule, that law, to censor people who speak out against them by labeling it hate speech. I feel as though as time progresses from 2016 to the current year, we've witnessed more and more of the left spiral into madness. Rampant riots across the streets, chaos. The left even seized a whole couple of blocks of a city and renamed it to Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or something like that. There was violence in those streets. Militant people with guns patrolling at night. They created borders to keep the police, and people ended up being trapped in that quote-unquote autonomous zone. There was filth in the streets, literal human feces in the streets, rampant open drug use, extreme unrest, and put it simply, the people who were residents in that area did not feel safe at all. The people in these communities whom the left claimed that they were here to be helping and protecting were the ones who were feeling the most unsafe. Businesses were looted, homes were broke into, and personal property was destroyed. Certain people were targeted because of their skin color. You can say what you will and claim that it's only a fringe group of people, but the fact of the matter is, this should not be happening in a constitutional republic, period. Note, I specifically said that we are a constitutional republic and not a democracy. Democracy tends to lead to mob rule. That's why our founding fathers labeled us a constitutional republic. People who claim they're protesting for peace and yet leave destruction and civil unrest in their wake aren't helping at all. They're making things worse. More than anything, they're making the problem much more worse than it already is. They're stoking resentment when they cause damage to middle-class citizens who have nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with the cause of their riots. It's crazy how they're being enabled by the mass media and by the left. Protests erupted in the wake of George Floyd's death. Regardless of whether you think the police are in the right or the wrong, regardless of your views on police brutality, one thing that should be agreed upon is that private properties of individuals should not be touched. There is a difference between looting and a protest.
OSHA strong. This is the message echoing through the city today as neighbors come together to try to heal after a more peaceful night of protesting here.
I just came from Mississippi, preparedness for the hurricanes. I thought that was bad until this. There just are no words. I just can't believe this is happening in my town.
For
multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the course of the night. A second night since Jacob Blake was seen shot in the back 7 times by a police officer. And what you are seeing now, these images came and come in stark contrast to what we saw over the course of the daytime hours in Kenosha and into the early evening, which were largely peaceful demonstrations in the face of law enforcement. It wasn't until night fell that things began to get a little bit more contentious. Things were thrown back and forth. Police started using some of those crowd dispersal tactics like tear gas, even playing very loud sounds to push them out. And then what you are seeing, the common theme that ties all of this together, is an expression of anger and frustration over what people feel like has become an all too familiar story playing out in places from across the country.
I have nothing against the protest. What I have a problem with is the looting. the rampant looting that occurred, and boy oh boy was there a lot of it, okay? The key words the mass media used was fiery but mostly peaceful protests. Tell me, where is the peace when there's $500 million worth of property damage reported? That means $500 million worth of insurance claims had to be made. That is crazy to me. No matter how just you believe your cause is, destroying the property of a man or woman should be the last thing you do. If destroying property was the answer, or your way of voicing displeasure, why didn't you start with your own property? You know, why don't you just burn down your own homes, loot your own businesses, slash your own tires? That will show those fascist pigs in blue, right? Again, my problem isn't the protest itself. I also believe that police brutality is an important issue in the United States. It's an issue that we haven't been touching on. It's a rampant issue that's been going on for some time now, as well as police corruption. We don't like to talk about that, but that is also something that occurs almost all the time. I also believe that unnecessary force is oftentimes used in situations. You could de-escalate situations before you choose to fire out your pistol. You could try. I also believe that. But burning and targeting people's properties does not solve anything. All it does is breed anger and creates even more civil unrest. It is really, really hard to get behind people who claim they're fighting against the fascists, while they are the ones employing the tools of fascists. Have you heard of the right or any political party other than the left insisting that laws should be made forcing people to talk in a certain way? What other political party in America has hounded people they don't agree with, to the extent where they stand outside of their homes at night, yelling, "We know where you sleep at night," for hours on end?
Taco Bell said, "We are outside your home to protest of fascism and racism. You promote hate that's led to an ideology that has led to thousands of people dying by the hands of the police, to trans women being murdered in the streets. Your policies promote hate, and we want you to know we know where you sleep at night."
Mailbox, synagogue.
We know where you sleep at night.
We know where you sleep at night.
I see Don Lemon having to worry about peaceful yet fiery protesters outside of his house, like Tucker Carlson did. How much damage has been reported by a right-wing organization like the Proud Boys? Almost close to zero. I also find it important to note that if you're going to mention a right-wing organization and you mention neo-Nazis, you should be corrected, because Nazism is a left-wing belief. The term Nazi means someone who's part of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Socialism and conservatism are not the same thing, so it makes no sense to call them right-wingers. The point I'm trying to make here is, most of the quote-unquote radical right-wing groups actually lean heavily on leftist doctrine, and even those hate groups who are unrightfully touted as being aligned with the right are immediately disavowed by the right. If you are a right-wing person and you say something remotely racist, or something that could cause a PR disaster or something like that, you immediately get ostracized, you get outcasted, you get checked, because the right really doesn't want to come off as being racist, especially after they've been touted as the racist ones for so long. However, a group that is known for attacking journalists who might be affiliated with news networks they don't agree with, a group that has been reported to stalk people for blocks on end when they show up to come and document their protests, a group that won't let other members speak to journalists unless they're left-wing media that agrees with them, a group that feels as though the privacy of people who don't agree with them does not matter, does not get condemnation from the left at all.
Yo! Fucking own, bitch!
The only time they face condemnation is when they attack politicians on the left. The left discourages dissent by making sure you're labeled as a racist if you go against anything they say. That type of fear that is created heavily compromises journalistic integrity, and it stifles the exchange of ideas, also halting civil discourse in its tracks. People won't go and try and discuss their viewpoints with other people because they're scared of what would happen when they go back to their home camp. Someone from the leftist party won't go and have civil discourse with someone from the right Because if they do something like that publicly, guess what would happen to them? They would be discredited. And I feel as though because of this, the cultural divide keeps on growing in this country. I truly believe if you voice any dissenting views in this day and age, even if you're playing devil's advocate, you will be faced with fire and fury from the left. If you personally feel as though Antifa goes too far, you will be labeled as a racist who hates black people and doesn't want equality at all. Mob rule, a hive mind, is not what democracy looks like. The left's unwillingness to condemn the actions of a bad few incentivizes the actions of others.
What you doing?
Shit! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Shit! Look at y'all stupid! You came out with a sword!
It's viewed as socially acceptable to physically assault people with different political views from you. That's why I find it so hard to get behind the left anymore. Another point to be made is that the difference between the left and the right is extremely stark, especially when you're talking about the way they conduct their protests. Again, I'm not trying to be a right-wing speaking piece. I'm just trying to point out what I've noticed. It seems almost laughable that a right-wing protest with people open carrying guns to show opposition to a group of lockdown laws that was arbitrarily decided upon by their governor, as the same thing as $500 million worth of property damage caused in the span of a couple days.
It's about standing up, taking back what is yours, which is the state of Michigan. Okay, so today let's celebrate, let's get loud, let's make some noise, and let's have fun. But we are never going to be silent again. If she can make patriotic Americans don a mask, tell us where we can go, where we can't go, how late we can stay out, if we can even go outside of our home, and go to church. If she can make us do all of those things with a stroke of her pen, what does she have up her sleeve for 2021? It's like, I don't trust this woman.
I do not feel as though these are the same things. You can argue that the left's cause is much more just and much more socially correct, but the fact of the matter is, the damage caused by the left far outweighs the damage caused by the right. What's even more frightening is that the victims of the far left's violence and abuse are then labeled as the aggressors. Two words here: Nick Sandmann.
We wouldn't want to blow anything out of proportion. And hey, is that white kid smirking? Get his ducks! You saw it here. That kid is a white supremacist. This is where he goes to school. Let him know how you feel about it. Next.
If you mention that name, you will find that people are surprisingly unaware that he sued CNN for defamation of character, and won. He didn't walk up to some poor Native American protester and started smirking in his face, taunting him, like CNN led you to believe. The left-wing Native American specifically targeted Nick Sandmann. He is seen on camera making a beeline towards the kid, and then beating his ancestral drum in that kid's face. But that was conveniently ignored, because the kid was wearing a MAGA hat, so he must be the racist and the aggressor in that situation. Even for the sake of argument, let's say that the kid was the aggressor. Do you think it's ethical for a massive news organization with hundreds and thousands of viewers in the whole country, do you think it's ethical for them to dox out the information of a kid because of a hat he was wearing? This blatant show of bullying by the left is absolutely baffling. It says a lot when the viewers of these news sources do not check their news organizations and hold them accountable. Nick Sandmann is not the only victim of this kind of unfair treatment, but he is by far the most famous victim. At the end of the day, normalization of this kind of behavior by the left is what leads me to be hesitant when we talk about the left. It also drives away their moderate voters. Ultimately, my problem is not with the message the left claims to have. I have nothing against combating racism, police brutality, societal unfairness. As a matter of fact, I am all for it. My problem is the actions taken by the far left, and the fact that the far left does not get held accountable for their actions. At the end of the day, I'm sure I've probably offended a couple of you guys, and that's good. It's been Ronin. That's it. See ya.